Nora Hale. That Christmas Eve, I held my 7-year-old daughter, Ellie, and shivered with her on their porch. Inside, laughter curled around the fireplace. Outside, the porch light glowed gold like a cruel joke. They told a little girl to be independent. They shut the door, and for the first time, I understood what it is to be treated like a stranger in your own story. I didn't cry. I set my hand on a useless ring of keys and knew, some doors are made to stay closed. Me, I'd build a different door. If they chose loud laughter, I chose the small morning jingle of metal on metal. Steady, patient, not giving up. Hit subscribe, turn on the bell, share this story, and don't forget to leave a comment where you're listening. I'm not telling this to complain. I'm telling it so someone, somewhere, standing under a freezing porch, knows you can still turn the heat on yourself. I won't bang on their door. I won't beg. I choose justice. Paper and inks and cheeks, sworn statements and tiny facts you can't explain away. I choose hope for Ellie, for myself, and for anyone ever taught that their pain is no big deal. But this isn't just a story about a locked door. When I started opening the real locks, I found Ellie's education fund quietly rerouted, internal emails they thought I'd never see, and a powerful smile already cracked right in the middle of the holidays. They thought the game was set. They didn't count on neighbors with long memories, a therapist who writes short and sharp, and the persistence of a mother with nothing left to lose but her silence. That night in St. Paul, the snow fell thick. I hung the old keys back on the wooden hook, like rehanging a promise to myself. Then I turned away from their porch, not to run, but to begin. Now come back with me to that first moment the porch light lied, and I decided to flip the story. Christmas Eve in St. Paul was as cold as a broken promise. I held Ellie inside my thin coat, her breath turning to white. On the Aldridge's porch, the yellow light shone like a counterfeit smile. I'm Nora Hale. My daughter is 7, doesn't like noise, only likes to touch the snowflakes and tuck her hands back into her pockets. Tonight, her hands shook so hard, even her pockets couldn't keep them warm. Inside, they laughed around the fireplace, cinnamon butter, the clink of glass, an orchestra scored without our names. The porch light calmly lit Ellie's wet shoes, like it was counting every drip. I knocked 3 times, short and firm. The sound thudded into wood and died on the rug. No one hurried. I knocked again. The door trembled. The porch light flickered once, like a wink. Finally, the lock rattled. Ethan cracked the door, the man who once promised to shield his child from anything cold. Tonight, he folded in on himself, like he was afraid the winter wind carried accountability. He looked us up and down, then adjusted a neat brown leather glove. You've got the wrong party, he said, voice even as a gas flame. The light bounced in his eyes, making them look warm just because of reflection. I looked at those perfect gloves, then at my daughter's hand. Ellie's fingers were pale, nails as small as sunflower shells. She tried to smile, afraid I'd be disappointed. Just hand the kid back, I said, keeping my voice level. Christmas isn't a cold resistance test. Behind Ethan, a wreath hung just so. A red ribbon spelled joy. I tried to read it out loud in my head to see if joy could open a door. Vivian, my ex-mother-in-law, appeared over Ethan's shoulder, elegant as a silver spoon. Don't make a scene on the porch, she said, sweet as whipped cream. Ellie needs to learn independence. I smiled without sound. Independence doesn't mean being left in the wind. From inside, a man's baritone, probably Charles, let out a small laugh. It sounded like a knife scoring an orange peel. clean and cold. Someone fed the fire and the flames popped brighter. I bent to straighten Ellie's scarf. She whispered, tiny enough for the wind to hear, "Mom, I want to go home." The butter cookie smell rolling from the house suddenly tasted like antiseptic. I looked up. "Ethan, open the door. Your daughter is cold." I spaced the words so each could stand upright. He shrugged. "You're off schedule. You know the rules." He angled his body like he was shielding the threshold from a draft he didn't want to share. Wind pushed across the porch, combing Ellie's hair like winter's hand. The light burned brighter, a golden halo pretty as a greeting card. Cards are always pretty, until you read the fine print. I pressed the doorbell. It chimed inside. In Ethan's gloved hand, a phone buzzed. He glanced down, smirked, silenced it. I saw the screen glow on the leather. Someone was watching the porch on their phone. "So someone's home," I said. "And someone's watching." Vivian flicked her hand. "We can observe without participating. That's a kind of education." She tilted her head, smile thin as thread. I looked at the doormat, the word "welcome" smeared by slush, like good wishes after they cross into reality. A muddy streak ran from the mat to where Ellie stood. No footprints turned back in. "How long has Ellie been out here?" I said, no question mark. I didn't need their answer. I had the weathers. Ethan checked his watch. "Don't be dramatic," he said, but the certainty had drained from his voice. I breathed in. Cinnamon from the house mixed with snow into a strange perfume. I've lived long enough to recognize a scent called decency. It wasn't here tonight. "You're the father, son," I said. "If there's one thing you have to do well, it's open the door." He nudged it wider, just enough for warm air to brush out and die on the sill. Behind him, glasses clinked again. Charles said something about the year-end charity fund. Charity runs warm. Porches don't. Ellie coughed. I pulled her closer, felt shoulder blades light as spring twigs. I wondered how many people sit in a heated room and call it teaching. "Tomorrow," Ethan said. "We'll talk to lawyers. Don't disturb tonight." I used to think family could be fixed with an apology. Turns out some households only understand the language of paperwork. I went calm, like a lake just wiped smooth by wind. I slid my hand into my pocket and took out my keys. Cold metal kissed my skin with a small, clean jingle. That sound was tidier than any promise. I set my house keys on their mat, right across the word "welcome." "You locked a child out here," I said. "Tonight I'm unlocking something else." Ethan blinked. Vivian stopped smiling. Inside, the fireplace gulped, a tiny sound like swallowing a spark. The whole house seemed to lean in to listen to something new. I carried Ellie down the steps. Snow cracked under my heels, each step a dry little report. The porch light burned behind us, faithfully spotlighting our humiliation. We reached the gate. The wind softened past the pines, like someone lifting a curtain. I looked back, not to plead, but to memorize the light of a house that no longer says our names. On the drive, Ellie's head sank into my shoulder, her breath evening out. Every breath was a nod. I knew which side she'd chosen. So had I. I buckled her into the back seat, tucked another thin blanket around her, and turned on the heat. In the rear view, their porch light twinkled like a foolish star. Stars can lead. That light only stands there, only. I rolled out of the quiet neighborhood, past roofs capped with snow, down the hill by the little market. With every turn, a new thought surfaced, clearer, like tire tracks sharpening in the snow. Tonight, I didn't need them to open a door. I'd unlock things my way. and just as I cut the engine outside my building, the doorbell in my hallway chimed once, short, hard. A white envelope slid through the slot, stopping on the threshold like a skittish bird. I glanced at the new keys hanging on the wooden hook, then picked up the envelope. Porch lights can lie. Paper can't. In the morning, St. Paul would wake up, and a different door would open. My apartment isn't bigger than a sigh. Tiny kitchen, a folding table, an electric fireplace that ticks like it's trying to join the conversation. I boiled water in my old kettle, stirred cheap cocoa into 2 paper cups from the corner store. The warmth rose up. Plain cocoa. Honest and kind. Ellie cupped her cup in both hands. Color crept back into her fingers, her eyes fixed on the dark surface like she trusted a slow miracle. I sat across from her. We didn't speak for a while. Silence has a temperature. Tonight it was warmer than the Aldridge fireplace. I set my phone on the table. The screen lit. Text crawled sideways like falling snow. Vivian's old messages surfaced. Days apart, oddly identical. Polite, cold, perfumed with fake rose. She liked phrases like meets maternal standards, stable environment, structured routine. Every word a white glove wiping off her own fingerprints. I scrolled further. Her email ran nearly the length of a sermon. She wrote about kids' emotional regulation, the habit of deep breathing, welcoming failure as opportunity. I reached the line comparing Ellie to well-mannered children at the club and smiled to myself. Between those sentences was a nameless gap, the porch. I put the phone down and jotted in my notebook. Time I knocked on their door. Time Ethan cracked it. Butter, cinnamon, porch light, Ellie's hands. All of it evidence, even if it wasn't paper yet. I photographed her wet gloves from earlier, the dirt mark on her scarf, the paper cup with a tiny lip print. Photos will talk if you let them. Ellie looked up and asked if tomorrow was a day off. I nodded. Tomorrow you sleep in, late pancakes. Nobody stands on a porch. She gave me half a smile, enough to drain the sadness from her eyes. I topped off the cocoa. The paper went soft with heat. Proof that kindness can be as thin as a paper cup and still carry warmth. My phone buzzed. Mrs. Kincaid. Her voice is like the elevator bell in an old building, always on time. She didn't circle around. Nora, I saw. She dropped by with a card for Vivian. When she turned to go, Grace led Ellie onto the porch and left her there, like setting a potted plant in the sun. Mrs. Kincaid heard Grace say Ellie needed to practice self-control. She waited another minute, assuming someone would come. No one did. I asked if she remembered the time. She said just before 7 p.m., and the temperature had already dipped below safe. She pressed safe, like someone who's been a mother, who's counted thermometers and warm towels. I thanked her and said we'd talk soon. She mentioned she still carries a little camera for snow shots. Maybe she'd caught something that lines up. I hung up, and my hands felt a little less cold. I reopened Vivian's email and read slower. At the end, there was a line slightly off-key. We are always observing to ensure Ellie learns to integrate. I highlighted it. Observe is an interesting word. It sounds like care if you're inside the house. It sounds like abandonment if you're on the porch. Ellie set her cup down and lined it up neatly. She whispered, asking if I was a good enough mom. The question tapped my knee, fell, and stayed there like a stone. I told her the only standard I know is her hands are warm. The only standard I know is her smile. The only standard I know is the door opens. She nodded. I tucked her scarf again and put on the half-finished cartoon. Ellie hooked her feet on the chair, leaned into the pillow, eyes on the screen. On the table, the cup steamed. cocoa mixed with the smell of coats drying on chair backs. I switched my phone to silent, but I didn't switch off my memory. I created a new folder and named it Porch. I dropped the photos in. I noted estimated times. I made a list of what to collect the right way. A letter from Ellie's therapist confirming her anxiety responses, vaccination records, school performance, any teacher notes about mood changes. I added a line to ask Ava how to request a doorbell log, if there's a basis. The kitchen window filmed with fog. I wiped a circle and looked into the dark alley. A black cat slid by, its tail skimming the pavement, leaving a trembling line. I thought of the wreath behind the Aldridge's door. Joy can be read different ways. Some people hang it. Some people use it to tie things up. A new email pinged from Vivian's office, short. She proposed enrolling Ellie in a skills training program. The activity list was long and glossy as a fancy restaurant menu. I read the words, balance, calm, moderation. I thought of purple fingers. Some programs exist to color over a blank no one wants to name. I replied with one line, "Thank you for the suggestion. I'll consider it after Ellie's slept enough and eaten well." I hit send and heard the faintest plop, like a pebble dropped into a far-off pond. Night stretched. The electric fireplace kept ticking, loyal like a poor friend. I dimmed the lights, leaving the kitchen lamp and the pineapple plant on the sill. Ellie dozed off on the chair, head tilted right, fingers still on her cup. I took a marker and split my list into 2 columns. For me, for others. First line is always warm the child. Second line, keep the paperwork intact. The doorbell rang, one short knock of sound, like someone who hits the beat. I looked at Ellie, laid a blanket over her shoulders, and went to the door. The hallway light flickered. Someone had just passed. I cracked it open. No one there, just a white envelope, skewed on the mat, like it had slid through the slot. No sender, no return. I picked it up. The paper felt colder than my hand. I tore the edge and unfolded a sheet, trifolded. Inside, a single line in blue ink, even script, soft as church advice. Don't try. Everything is arranged. I stood still, listening to Ellie's steady breath, the electric heater swallowing the draft, the cocoa settling in a paper cup. I folded the note, set it beside my notebook, and pulled out a chair. Christmas was over, but the game had new rules, and in the morning, I'd start asking who did the arranging. Ava leaned back, tapping her pen on the file. "Don't bring a knife to a machine gun fight in court," she said, eyes never leaving me. "We need paperwork, paper that breathes." I nodded. The line felt cold and warm at once, like breath fogging a windshield at dawn. In St. Paul, winter teaches you to talk less and keep more proof. We sat in Ava's small office, the window looking out on a street freshly plowed. Someone's Christmas tree across the way still wore its lights, blinking like a wink. I unzipped my backpack and laid out what I'd gathered last night. First was my phone. On it, I'd saved photos of Ellie on the porch. Nothing pretty, but the truth was in the frame's edge. Time, date, location. Ava told me to send the originals. I did, along with screenshots of the photo info. The metadata showed right before 7, with the temperature pulled from a location-based weather app. "This stuff doesn't know how to lie," I said, surprised how much comfort I took in something so small. Next were Vivian's emails. I'd downloaded them as PDFs, keeping the subject lines and timestamps intact. Phrases like meets maternal standards and stable environment sat tidy on the page, as spotless as their living room. Ava read, turning pages with her fingertip, eyes lingering on the white space between lines. This word repeats, she said, tapping observe. They like to watch. She gave a small, blade-thin smile. We'll show the court what they were watching. I told her about Mrs. Kincaid, ready to give a statement, maybe even photos from her little camera. Ava block-printed the name and wrote, "Neighbor witness" beneath it. An old neighbor who remembers details is worth more than a brand-new camera pointed the wrong way, she said. I opened the app for the old joint account that limped along after we split. The transaction history read like a marriage, small lines, repeating, then a sudden tilt. I pointed to 2 entries on December 24th. One was a Venmo to Grace, enough for a new coat and a little silence. Note, holiday. The other was an incoming transfer from a source I'd never seen before. The shorter the note, the more suspect. Ava had me export CSV and PDF. Email them over. Money trails rarely stop at the porch, she said. They walk right through the living room into the kitchen. We called Dr. Patel. Her voice was warmer than my electric heater, but her wording was needle clean. She agreed to write a letter confirming Ellie's anxiety responses, describing what happens when a child is left in the cold without a trusted adult. I don't judge families, she said. I describe phenomena. The phenomena can say the rest. Ava reminded me to request Ellie's latest school notes, any mention of behavior shifts after time at the Aldridges. I nodded and added it to the 4 others column. When I mentioned the phone screen glowing on Ethan's leather glove, Ava leaned back, thinking. What doorbell system do they use? She asked. I said probably the same brand half the block uses. Then we start with the house across the street. By noon, I was at Mrs. Kincaid's. She welcomed me with toast and cheap air freshener. I asked about Christmas Eve. She nodded immediately, like a switch. She pulled a little camera from a drawer, plugged it into an old computer, scrolled past snow photos to a dark frame streaked with the porch light's gold. The photo wasn't crisp, but you could see 2 shadows on the porch, one small, one tall, and in the corner, a sliver of the countdown timer from the neighbor's doorbell cam reflected in the glass. Mrs. Kincaid lit up like she'd snagged a signature in a puddle. I screenshotted it and asked her to keep the original file. She nodded, saying her grandson had already backed it up to the cloud. I'm old, she said, eyes bright. But I learn fast when it's about a kid. That afternoon, I returned to Ava's. The table was a jigsaw of documents. She arranged them in an order that wasn't romantic. Time, source, reliability. Sticky notes went on top, each color a type of evidence. The little flags warmed the room. We have a story that can be checked, Ava said. Their door has a light. The light has a photo. The photo has a timestamp. The timestamp matches an email. The email matches a transfer. And a child has a doctor. I was quiet. Sometimes hope doesn't arrive like fireworks. It shows up as a paperclip, a signature, a line someone assumed meant nothing. Ava opened her laptop and had me drop everything into a shared folder. She named it Porch. I laughed. Easier to remember, she said. Dry, but warm. We paused to breathe. I poured tea and set the cups next to the stack. Outside, snow started again. Small flakes, persistent. In St. Paul, snow knows the rules. Fall evenly. Cover everything. Leave a crease. Ava opened the bank CSV and zoomed in on the 2 December 24th entries. Venmo to Grace, she read. Note, holiday. She frowned and slid to the other line's description. Incoming transfer, she read slower. Source, abbreviated, AET. She zoomed again. The letters cleared, like a name sticking its head out of the dark. The screen light hit her eyes, porch light cold, with a fire behind it. This transfer, Ava said, tilting her head as if recognizing an old story. Which of Ethan's funds is it from? Her hand rested on the trackpad. The name rings a bell. Aldridge Education Trust. Morning at the county courthouse was cold as an open freezer. Old coffee, disinfectant, and high heels on stone tiles, pressed down like notary stamps on a story already written. I held Ellie's hand in the hallway, then walked her to the children's waiting room and told her to watch the little snow globe like a window with a roof. Grace arrived half a beat late. New cream coat. A soft fur collar like late-season whipped cream. Expensive perfume slipping past us like an unspoken apology. Chin up, clean steps, eyes that missed it on cue. She greeted me by my first name, as if we were close. That night was a misunderstanding, she said softly. Ellie ran out on her own. She loves snow. The line hit the tile perfectly round, with no edge to grab. I nodded like someone practicing endurance. Liking snow isn't the same as sleeping on a porch, I thought, but saved it for later. Ava brushed my elbow. Just breathe, she whispered. Don't chase their version. We brought paper. Inside, cold blue light from the windows washed over everyone, making us all look more honest than we meant to. Ethan sat straight, dark tie like a lane stripe. Vivian touched her pearls, each tap a little self-soothe. Charles shook a clerk's hand like he knew the route. Grace took the stand. She sprinkled her story like powdered sugar. Ellie asked to go outside to be independent. She left the door open. She stood right there. She turned to grab a scarf for exactly 1 minute. When she turned back, I'd arrived and misread everything. Ava stood. Her voice was as flat as a winter lake. What time was that, Grace? A clock's simple question. About 6:30, Grace said, give or take. Ava nodded and set a thin clipped packet on the table. This is the doorbell log from the house across the street. Their camera captured movement on the Aldridge porch at 6:58 and 7:03. Both times show one adult and one child standing on the porch. The interior door is closed. Can you help us understand that? Grace blinked. My watch could have been off. Could be, Ava said, smiling a hair. Watches drift. Snow and porch light rarely argue. The air changed color in a beat. I heard the clerk's pen stop, like someone shutting their eyes to swallow a bitter pill. Vivian folded her arms, twisted a ring. Ethan studied his shoes. Charles smiled, thin as thread. Ava slid over another packet. And this is a statement from an account tied to the Aldridge family, she said. On December 24th, a Venmo to Grace. Note, holiday. 10 minutes earlier, an incoming transfer to the source account labeled AET. I saw Grace's shoulders catch, small as a swallowed sob. Charles lifted a hand, smile widening by a thread. Year-end bonuses are normal, he. Warm as a red envelope. Bonuses are great, Ava said, still impeccably polite, especially when they follow policy with a calendar and criteria. I'm only trying to understand why the bonus lands on December 24th, right before a 1 minute that lasts until 7:00-something. The judge glanced at the pages and tapped the air once with his gavel, reminding everyone that nothing gets to be louder than ink. Ava dipped her head and went on. Grace, were you responsible for Ellie's comings and goings that evening? Yes, but Grace stopped. The eyes watered right on cue. Where were you while Ellie was on the porch? Just behind the door that shows closed at 6:58, Ava said, fingertip resting on the printed timestamp. I could see the thin lines connecting. Porch light, the door sound, motion logs, the word holiday. No blood, just ink. Ink has its own weight. Ava opened a manila folder and pulled an email. "This is a message Mrs. Vivian sent my client a week before Christmas," she said. "It includes the line, 'We always observe to ensure Ellie learns to integrate.' I think on Christmas Eve everyone observed very well. I just don't see the ensure anywhere." Vivian tilted her head. "You're interpreting," she said, silk soft. "No," Ava said. "I'm assembling. The court can interpret." Time shrank to short breaths. Grace gripped the chair. Her nail clicked. The bank printout lay open like a lake that doesn't know how to lie. I remembered her perfume in the hall. Now it mixed with sanitizer into a half-seasoned smell. "Was the December 24th payment a bonus?" Ava asked, as lightly as asking for salt. "It was a thank you," Grace said, eyes sliding a little. "A thank you for what exactly?" "For the year-end work. What kind of work ends with a 7-year-old standing on a porch at 7 at night?" The question dropped. No one bent to pick it up. Charles switched stance. Ethan rubbed his wrist. I looked at my hands and thought about thin paper cups that carry warmth and thick envelopes that carry silence. Ava returned to the doorbell log. "You said 1 minute. The log shows at least 13. You said the door was open. The photo shows it shut. You said Ellie ran out. The reflection shows an adult shoulder braced in the frame. I want to believe you. I just don't know where to put that belief." Grace said nothing. Expensive perfume can't cover a gap. The judge cleared his throat and told us to proceed in order. Ava gathered the stack, leaving behind 2 photos and a bank page like 2 anchors and a line. "No further questions," she said. In the hall, the corridor stretched like a runway with no planes. I stood by the window and watched the snow. Each flake fell even, slow, exact. In the kids' room, Ellie hugged the snow globe and shook it so the white would fall again. Ava came over, exhaling like someone who'd sprinted without moving. "Time drift is the soft spot in their story," she said. "Now the bonus has a different smell." "What smell?" I asked. "The smell of a story bought by the minute," she said. "And when a story is bought, it leaves a receipt." Her phone buzzed. A new email lit the screen, subject line short and sharp as a paring knife. She skimmed it, brow pausing for a beat. "From who?" I asked. Ava looked up. "Someone who used to work for the Aldridges," she said slowly, "says the bonus is just the wrapping. The real gift lives in a fund with 3 letters, AET. The courtroom was as quiet as a chapel waiting for the first hymn. Winter light poured through the high windows, cold and even, like the breath of the heater. Charles Aldridge stepped forward and shook the chief clerk's hand, with the kind of handshake that belongs to gala nights, where every promise smells like wine. I sat in the second row, hands laced under a cheap coat. Ava sat beside me, opening a labeled binder, each sticky note like a tiny charm. I could hear my own pulse more than the shoes on stone. The bailiff called the room to order. We rose, then sat as one. The judge's bench gleamed enough to mirror a face, but the clearest thing I saw was the Aldridge's unmarred politeness. Their attorney went first, voice soft as velvet. He smiled when he objected and said, "Your Honor," each time he slid a blade. Velvet gloves, yes, but enough force to push an old door. Ava's opening was tight and cool. She submitted Vivian's emails, Dr. Patel's summary, the porch photos with metadata. "Let the evidence tell the story," she said, no need to raise her voice. Opposing counsel stood. He touched his cuff and said, "Procedure," like a spell. "Your Honor, there's no proper foundation for the metadata, no established chain of custody for the original files, and the doctor's letter is a one-sided narrative." The judge looked down. The gavel didn't fall, but her words landed in my gut. "The court agrees in part," she said. "The The photo is not admitted at this time. The doctor's letter will be considered as context only. The emails are admitted, with limited weight. I could almost hear Vivian's eyebrows meet. In the front row, Ethan shifted. His heel clicked. Charles leaned back, his smile as thin as an envelope flap. Ava didn't flinch. She pulled a bank statement and flipped to the Venmo to Grace. The number sat there, black, neat, undecorated. "This payment," Ava said, dated December 24th. Opposing counsel rose again. "The inflow 10 minutes prior is unauthenticated," he said, unhurried. "We cannot speculate about any linkage." The word speculate sounded like a pin dropping into a thick rug. The judge nodded slightly. "The court will admit the statement but separate it from the unauthenticated source," she said. "Parties may supplement." I swallowed something that tasted part salt, part metal. Ava rested her hand on the binder's edge like pressing a palm to a wound. "We will supplement," she said. "Steady." Grace took the stand. She folded her coat on her lap. Her perfume greased the words. She repeated the story. Ellie loves snow. Ellie went out on her own. She turned away for 1 minute. Ava asked the time. Grace said around 6:30. Ava offered the motion log from across the street. Opposing counsel was up in an instant. "No certification from the system owner." The judge thought a beat, then nodded. "Excluded for now." Ava tried the other slice of the log, the reflection on the door glass. "Not sufficiently clear," the judge said. "Neither warm nor cold." Next, I leaned back. Just outside the door, Ellie hugged a snow globe like a tiny roofed house. Inside the courtroom, snow was paper and gravity was procedure. Ava asked to read a line from Vivian's email. "We always observe to ensure Ellie learns to integrate." Opposing counsel stood again. "Context," he said. "And meaning," the judge nodded. "Noted, with limited consideration." Each limited consideration felt like another pane of glass set between me and the truth. "Glass is clear," I told myself, "but your hand can't get through. It's like watching a porch light through thick snow. The light still shines, and your skin is still cold." Ava pivoted, tapping the AET line. "Please note the timing," she said, same even cadence. "An inflow 10 minutes prior, repeating initials, and a thank you to the sitter right after." Opposing counsel braced a hand on the table. "There is no foundation for that conclusion," he said, punching each word. "We are not here to weave tales." He smiled. "Barely. I thought about stories woven in velvet, wrapped around someone's neck to keep them warm while snapping a vertebra." The judge checked the clock. 10-minute recess, she said. "Then we return to child care." A soft gavel tap, like a pen to a bullet point. I went to the kids' room. Ellie lifted the snow globe. "Look, Mom," she said, small but sure. Inside, a white house stood among pines. No porch light, just an open door. "You okay, kiddo?" I asked. "I'm okay," she said, leaning into my arm. I kissed her forehead. Her hair smelled clean, like a morning before any adults have lied. Back in the courtroom, the interim rulings dropped like answers nobody wanted. Parts of our request denied for lack of proper foundation. The doctor's letter not dispositive. The fund issue severed to a separate hearing. Ava closed the binder. "We lost on technique," she said quietly. "Not on truth." The words sat between us like a chair no one dared to take. We stepped out. The hall was busier now. Wet coat smell and rushed coffee. A stranger brushed my elbow as she passed, an accidental touch that warmed. At the steps, a few reporters. A young woman approached, mic in a black foam windscreen, face alert. "Are you afraid of the Aldridge family?" she asked, eyes steady, not predatory. I looked toward the lot, where the trees stood like black exclamation points, with no question. I thought about velvet gloves, the gavel tap, the snow globe in my daughter's hands. I saw what really scared me most. "I'm only afraid," I said, "their porch light will break again." The story went live at 6 a.m. Headline, "Spare and cold. Child left on porch on Christmas." The photo showed a jaundiced porch light, snow up to the ankles, the edge of a child's scarf in frame like a silent affidavit. Comments came down thicker than last night's snow. I brewed coffee in my dented little pour-over, opened the laptop, and watched the city tell the story for me. The neighborhood parent group buzzed, the church circle shared, a few burner accounts asked for more details, and vanished. I read slowly, kept my hands from shaking, and tried to hear a real heartbeat in all that noise. Someone sent a still from the porch-cam across the street, pulled from their video, low angle, the porch light streaking long on the door glass. Two silhouettes were clearer than yesterday. One big, one small, close enough you could almost hear the breathing. The porch light stayed loyal, telling the story it had been paid to tell. The reporter from yesterday asked if I wanted my name withheld. I told her, "Call me Nora, but keep Ellie private." "I don't want my kid turned into a slogan," I said. She paused, then answered, warm and compact, "The story will speak for you." By noon, another neighbor sent a doorbell export with timestamps synced to the network clock. I forwarded it straight to Ava, with a screenshot of the device info. "Not romantic, but it breathes," I wrote, borrowing her words. Dr. Patel's letter landed at 1 o'clock. 3 short paragraphs, clean lines, no righteous scent. He confirmed Ellie's anxiety response and described its recurrence when she's left in the cold without a trusted adult beside her. "I don't assign blame," he wrote. "I describe events." I almost cried. How kindness can be scalpel sharp without breaking skin. Mrs. Kincaid called. She had something I needed to hear. I brought sandwiches and traded for an audio file. Grace's voice in someone's kitchen, a spoon tapping a bowl, a little laugh like a scale you practice but never finish. "Year-end bonus is generous," she said. "Just follow the steps and everyone's happy." Mrs. Kincaid didn't interrupt. She let the words find their own chairs. I sent the file to Ava with the time of recording. Ava replied immediately with 3 words. "Save the original." I understood. I backed it up 2 places and named the file like a prescription label. If anyone asks, I'll hand them the right bottle. By afternoon, a second article asked about the community's duty to children in the cold. No names, no addresses, just the hard question, do we observe or intervene? I thought about observe in Vivian's email, a word that sits between 2 meanings like a chair that works in the kitchen or the parlor. Put it in the wrong place, and it becomes an obstacle. At the corner store, the cashier tucked extra cocoa into my bag. "For the little one," she whispered, as if kindness needed hiding. I thanked her and hurried out. On the sidewalk, an old man nodded at me, the way you nod to someone who just won a fight no one saw. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Photos, emails, a person who'd seen Ellie on the porch from the far end of the alley. I couldn't take every offer, but I answered the ones with a time, a source, a chance to stand up in front of someone who isn't me. Pity is easy. Time is hard. Today the city spent time. Ellie came home early, snow globe in hand, proud that her teacher sat her by the heater during reading. I asked what she wanted for dinner. "Pancakes," she said, even though it was afternoon. I made a small batch. Butter filled our stomachs like an umbrella put exactly where it belongs. Out there, grown-ups argued. In here, a round plate put order back on the table. Ava video called at 4:30. She looked tired. eyes bright. "The doctor's letter is solid," she said. "Mrs. Kincaid's recording is gold. Guard it. The neighbor cam is enough to lay a timestamp foundation." I asked about the fund. She exhaled. "The fund needs a spine. Money doesn't walk alone. It clings to someone's hand." I told her about the pushback, the accounts accusing us of using the media. Ava shrugged. "They'll say whatever makes them feel less guilty. We'll open the window and let other people stick a hand out and measure the wind." I thanked her. Her calm has drawers. She knows where to set me down. Dusk. Streetlights flicked on. The windows across the way blinked like heavy-eyed people. I cleared the table, washed dishes, hung the towel to dry. Ellie built a house from old blocks, a roof, 4 colors, figures standing inside. No porch light, people indoors. Just as I thought we might get a quiet night, Ava's screen share thumbnail flashed on my lock screen. A screenshot of an email header. Subject, blunt as a paring knife. Withdrawal ledger. The sender masked, just a short address like a shadow. I called. She picked up at once. Paper rustled on her end like bird wings. "Someone just sent me a withdrawal ledger from the Aldridge Education Trust," she said, voice even. Line items moving into the family account, labeled operating expenses, right in the run-up to Christmas. I didn't speak. I listened to my heartbeat shift, like wind changing streets. Ava went on, slower now, as if reading a vertical line in tree grain. "The sign off at the bottom isn't a name," she said. "It reads, 'Someone once asked me to do the right thing.'" I looked out the window at the streetlights standing like candles. The city had started to talk. Someone had just whispered loud enough for the law to hear. And tomorrow, that whisper will need a voice. Ava spread the files like a winter map. Blue, yellow, and pink sticky notes sat exactly where they belonged, each color a footprint. She tapped her pen twice and said, calm as if reading a thermometer. The Education Trust was set up for Ellie at birth. Grantor is Ethan. Co-signer is Charles. I looked at the bold type on the cover, Aldridge Education Trust. 3 harmless letters that looked like a ribbon, but a ribbon will tighten if you pull it hard enough. Ava pulled her chair closer and flipped to the access rights chart. This is the key, she said, tapping a thin line of text. Not metal. Who gets to click approve? This kind of key opens money and then locks up accountability. I nodded. I don't trust wood doors anymore. Since Christmas, I trust paper. Paper is cold, but it doesn't pretend to shake. We built the timeline. 3 months before Christmas, a tidy, regular run of transfers from AET into the family trust account. Memos, operating expenses. Another, year-end consulting. Enough money to buy hundreds of kids' coats, with decent gloves to match. I glanced at the photo of Ellie on the porch pinned to the corner of the table. The yellow light laid a thin honey glaze across her cheek. I wondered what kind of honey stays warm till 7 p.m. Ava set down the anonymous ledger we got last night. The numbers marched left to right, like they were out for a jog. She drew a highlighter line connecting the operating expenses entries to the dates of Aldridge family functions, where Charles talked about a solid year. Solid for whom? I asked, my voice landing like a string tuned to pitch. For whoever holds the keys, Ava said. Not a jab, just a fact. She called an independent accountant on speaker. On the other end, a brisk analysis. Paper rustling like a spark catching. Those memo lines are how you sweep everything into one big bag, he said. When useful, they call it governance. When convenient, they call it process. I wrote same bag, many names. Ava opened Dr. Patel's letter and laid it beside the school's report. Recurrent anxiety response. She read slowly. Worst, in the last days of December. Then she pointed to the bank statement. And here, days the money left the trust. 2 straight lines separated by a ruler's width. Outside the window, St. Paul was the color of photocopy paper. I suddenly wanted to crank my space heater to high, sit Ellie in front of it, and let her hear the plastic expand. Some things swell with heat. Some things balloon with power. We drafted a letter to the fund administrator, preserve the balance, list all users with access, produce a 12-month history of permission changes. Ava wrote the first line in black ink, straight as a boundary stake. My client is Ellie's mother and primary custodian. We're not accusing, Ava said. We're asking whose pocket the keys are in. I thought about the wooden hook in my apartment where I hang the old keys. Every morning the metal taps itself, a tiny reminder I still have work to do. Now I know there are key rings that never make a sound. They change hands with a click. Ava drew a timeline on the whiteboard. Left, Ellie's birth. Middle, trust formation paperwork. Ethan's name, Charles's consent signature. Right. 3 months before Christmas, arrows into operating expenses. Each arrow a question that doesn't need a question mark. She capped the marker. What bothers me, she said, is that 2 things happened at once. The child on the porch and her fund flowing out. A family will call that coincidence. A court will call it context. I swallowed. Context sounds civilized, like a white tablecloth. Put the right dish on it, and it becomes proof of taste. My phone buzzed. An email from Vivian's office slid into the inbox, polite as an old butler. She proposed a winter outing for Ellie, with guides and cold resilience training. I forwarded it to Ava. She read the subject line and gave a dry laugh. They want to turn the porch into enrichment. We went back to the ledger. Ava zoomed in on an entry with an internal shorthand. Next to it, a link to an e-sign receipt. If we're lucky, the e-signature will tell us who clicked last, she said. If not, we'll ask the system admin. I asked if there was any way to get internal emails. Ava shook her head. We don't hack. We invite. And once a story starts to crack, someone will want the invitation out. The afternoon moved like a frozen river, water still running underneath. I picked Ellie up from school. She ran to me, proud she'd drawn a house with no porch light, only an open door. I added a hook for the keys, she said, a small smile. Back home I fed her, turned the heater up, opened the laptop. Ava sent a draft motion. Preserve the fund, restrict outflows, set a separate hearing on AET. I read every word. They had weight, not the kind you feel in your hands, the kind that balances a child's sleep. The phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number, ending in 1213. I checked the peephole. Empty hall. On the screen, a single line. There are internal emails about how to keep access to the fund. I hadn't replied when a second text popped up, short as a key without a ring. Community Library, 7 p.m. Come alone. I set the phone down and listened to Ellie's small laugh in the kitchen as the pancake flipped. On the wooden hook, my keys brushed. A thin, appointment-sounding chime. Outside, the streetlights came on slowly, one by one. The city kept talking, and someone was about to show me where the silent key had been. In the morning, Ava spread the materials across the table like a map with the route already circled. The internal email chain about keeping access, the trust statements, the e-signature receipts. She hit send on the new motion. A clean little ding hopped through the room, neat as law, giving a nod. I looked out the glass at gray St. Paul and felt a path brighten inside me. An emergency hearing was set for that afternoon. Charles sat in the front row, fingers loosely laced, the same practiced smile. But when Ava pointed to the access rights adjustment that lined up with the outflow dates, the smile cut off like someone flicked a switch. Ethan stared at the floor, avoiding Ellie's eyes. She hugged her snow globe tight to her chest, like she was holding the roof of a real home. Ava spoke slowly, each word with a place to stand. She put the internal emails on the table, voice steady. Here, they call it operating expenses. To a child, that's a winter coat taken away in January. The room went chapel quiet. Opposing counsel pinched his lips, reached for procedure to lean on. But the papers were breathing on their own. I didn't jump in. I've learned that silence tells the story when it stands next to the truth. Every arrow on Ava's timeline ran from a withdrawal date to the nights Ellie shook on a porch. No chest beating, just alignment. The judge read fast, then again more slowly. Who holds final authority? She asked. The emails answered. Any conflicts of interest? The e-sign receipt raised its hand. I could see the invisible ladder people use to climb over responsibility, and this time it was missing rungs. Charles stopped smiling. He straightened his tie, shifted like switching scripts. Ethan rubbed his fingers, the old tic when he's cornered but wants to look composed. Vivian exhaled barely, like someone who's brushed a blade. At recess, Ava turned to me. There'll be turns and detours, but this road goes through. I nodded, hearing the soft grit of the snow globe in Ellie's hands. Snow doesn't need permission to fall. It obeys gravity, a law that rarely takes sides with wealth. I understood I didn't need to pound on doors anymore. I was changing my locks. Therapy on Wednesdays and Saturdays, non-negotiable. Ellie's taekwondo on Fridays. The first kicks are clumsy. The eyes are steady. I get up 30 minutes earlier, make coffee, read my "for me" list out loud before I read the "for others." By evening, the new key ring hangs beside the snow globe. When the metal brushes, I hear a thin little sound like a promise that's exactly big enough. My door opens by habit now, not by permission. Dinner is simple. The chairs are warm. The phone goes dark after 9. I keep my stomach out of comment sections that don't pay for Ellie's meals. Ava filed the final motion, title plain as a boundary line. Preserve Ellie's 529. Temporary freeze on transfers. Appoint an independent auditor. She attached Dr. Patel's letter, Mrs. Kincaid's statement, the neighbor's camera pulls, and the internal emails. Each file a brick, set square, enough to cross a river. Decision day, the hallway was fuller and quieter. People don't need to shout once the words are on the page. The judge looked around the room and read, "The court grants protection for Ellie's 529. Temporary restrictions on withdrawals and a full 12-month transaction report are ordered. A neutral administrator will oversee until full adjudication." Something in me slid off the hanger. I looked back at Ellie. She didn't grasp the provisions, but she understood my hand in hers and my smile. Ethan bowed his head. Charles scribbled like a man heading to a meeting where his seat isn't reserved anymore. Outside, the air smelled of late rain. Reporters waited on the steps. I didn't dodge. I spoke into the mic without raising my voice. Justice doesn't need a megaphone. Justice isn't a boom. It's the soft click of keys. The reporter met my eyes, nodded, and wished Ellie a good night. We thanked her, moved through the cluster. Someone slipped Ellie a pack of cocoa, this time with marshmallows. That night we got home early. Ellie set the snow globe beside the keys. "Do we have a porch light?" she asked. I switched on the light outside. The gold spill lay across the stoop, calm as a blanket. We do, I said, but light is for showing the way. A home opens with people. I wrote a few lines for tomorrow. The For Me column: take a walk after dinner, read, call my mom. The For Others column got shorter. Thank the right people at the right time. I texted Mrs. Kincaid, Dr. Patel, and the reporter who didn't turn Ellie into a slogan. Before dawn, the mailbox clicked. A thicker envelope than usual. A notice of an ethics hearing from the hospital system's oversight board. First line: parties of interest are invited to provide input. Last note: one board member has withdrawn. I didn't need the name. When a candle goes out, a room changes how it breathes. I slid the letter into my notebook next to the page titled New Locks and smiled. Someone's porch light will turn on for the right reason. This time, it will shine for people who open from the inside. I watched Ellie sleep, her face loose as blank paper. I killed the stove light and the kitchen light and left the porch light on. Outside, St. Paul was quiet as a song in a lower key. I brushed the key ring, heard the small chime, and knew this chapter isn't the last. Tomorrow I'll stop by the community library and book a small room. Someone just sent another email chain. There's a parallel fund used for media contingency. I pocketed my keys, grabbed my coat, and smiled to myself. The next stretch already has light. And this time, we're the ones flipping the switch. If this story touched your heart, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Every click helps us bring more powerful stories of empathy, justice, and silent strength to life. Your support is what fuels this journey. Let's keep standing together and rising higher one story at a time. Stay safe and inspired.